just in case you're expecting somebody different, I'm Dakta Green. So if I'm not the person you expected to be here seeing, fuck off now. Okay. I should have mentioned at the beginning that coarse language may apply from time to time, so fuck you. Now I'm here, I'm holding this because I just want you to know I had an iPad. It's got nothing on it, it's all for games. So I had to make this up because I was told that I needed to sort of make a speech, and this is going to be a little bit different to a speech. This is going to be whatever I can remember to tell you after I had a big blaze up an hour ago. So we'll be good, we're going to get through this, okay? To start with, I thought I'd tell you a little bit. I'm not going to tell you what's on my Wikipedia and all those other leaky type shows. You can find that out for yourself. But what we're going to do is just give you a little bit of background, and I'm going to tell you what I think the future of cannabis is in this country. And we're going to spend most of the time just having a conversation. I'd like to hear what you've got to say and your input and your questions, more importantly. I'm here to have a conversation. So for those of you that haven't seen the Wikipedia, etc., my background is I was born in 1950. I was 67 years old a few weeks ago, and I'm a latecomer to cannabis. I was 39 years old in my 40th year when I had my first taste of cannabis. My son introduced it to me. My adult son said, "You want to try this?" And I woke up the next morning thinking, shit, that was good. And I went to work. I was working with one guy, and we were in the property business in Melbourne. I went to work, and this is a guy that I used to drink with on a weekly basis. And I told him what I'd done the night before. And a friend that he was my first experience of, I will look down my nose at everybody who thinks that cannabis is okay in society. So fuck you guys. Not interested in you people. If you think cannabis is something that makes me bad, then you have a lot of living and learning to do. So but that was my first experience. Now 3 days later I said to my son, "Got any more of that stuff?" He said, "No." So we had our first experience of going on a road trip into town, into a bar, me in my business suit, my son in his casual gear. Goes up to the bar and he asks if he can score. I can't even remember what the words were now. And the guy looked at me, the barman looked at me and said, "Oh no, I don't know what you're talking about, mate." My son said, "Go and wait in the car." He came out 5 minutes later and he said, "Yeah, they thought you were a detective." And then I learned my first real lesson about cannabis. Don't smoke in the car. And then expect to drive home the very second time that you're ever stoned. The smart move, which I learned afterwards, was to go home and then roll it up. But no, we smoked it in the car, in the alleyway, behind the pub, and I drove home. From memory, I'm still driving, because it was real slow. And it took me a long time to learn to drive stoned, and I have to say that I finally perfected it. So it is possible to do that, and there are many studies around the world that say cannabis actually makes you a safer driver. I'm not going to get into that debate. I don't really care. At the moment, I just want people to stop locking me in jail. What I'm wearing is not a prop. It is real. And the CDC is California Department of Corrections. That was my first serious jail time. I went to America to put in an outdoor crop, and an indoor crop for that matter, in the middle of nowhere with my son. I got snapped on the property, and after a sentence of 3 years and lots of lies told by police under oath. It was my first experience of the bullshit by police telling lies. So I ended up getting sentenced to a term of imprisonment. Fortunately, it was suspended, and I was able to serve a lesser time in the county jail. So that was better than the federal or state penitentiaries, because they are very serious, hard-ass places in America. So yeah, then I got sent out of the country. I was told, go home, we don't want you. I used medical cannabis as being my excuse for what I was doing. No, they didn't want to know about that. It had only just been passed and no one knew how to get away with anything. And certainly my lawyer was as useless as shit. So I left. And I came back to New Zealand, and just at that time when a parliamentary select committee was considering changing cannabis laws under the Labour government of Helen Clark. And I thought, well, I could go back to Australia where I've been living for a long time, having now been kicked out of America, or I could stay here because this looks really good. Because I was satisfied that when our parliamentarians understood the truth about cannabis, that it would be legal in a flash. Well, what a fucking idiot I was. And I've never failed to amaze myself with my belief that we're on the verge. Having said that, I actually do believe right now we are on the verge. And I think you all know that too. When we see what is happening around the world, I am less worried today about people like Bill English saying we're not going to change the cannabis laws. We've changed the medical enough. All I can think of is the first tour that I went on with Mary Jane and our stop in Gore. I went into Bill English's office in the middle of Gore and left the appropriate information for Bill English. And when I left, my crew members were outside sparking up. So we stood outside the office there and took some film of us having a big smoke up outside Bill English's office. And he is still as out of touch as he ever was. If you can't look around the world and see what is happening in cannabis law reform activities, I mean, for goodness sake, Canada will be legal next year. Yeah, they've got their issues, they've got their problems, they're still arresting people. One of the most famous campaigners for law reform ever, Mark Emery, he's recently been arrested. So, you know, it's not over, the stupidity carries on.
And facing a life jail term.
Is he facing life now for that one?
Yes.
Okay.
But him and his wife.
Yeah, and his wife. Yeah, well, it is stupid because Canada has announced they're going to be legal. He jumped the gun a little bit and opened a few franchise stores, cannabis culture stores, and now he's facing life. I didn't know that, so that fits into that crazy, stupid, what the hell are we doing in this country? But then there are lots of crazy things that happen in Parliament, and it's our job as citizens to try and keep the bastards honest and to work our way through the bullshit. Now, my history is that in the 1970s, without you raising a hand, who else here was alive in the 1970s? No one.
Me. Yeah.
Oh, you were. There you go. But a young chap. 1980, the law was changed to allow shops to open on the weekend, on Saturdays specifically. Up until then, from the Second World War until 1980, shops were closed on weekends. I opened a store, a marketplace actually. I had 100 odd tenants and they were odd, most of them. but 100 tenants in this market, and we open on Saturdays. We were actually the forerunners to the Nike slogan, "Just do it." It wasn't their slogan then, I think they stole it from us. We just decided if we're going to open our shop on Saturday, like, just do it. So we fought that fight, and in 1980 the law was changed to allow shops to open on Saturdays. And that was my first taste of the pleasures of a successful campaign. Then in the 1980s I started New Zealand's first casino. I'll rephrase that. I started New Zealand's first legal casino. There were plenty around, particularly in the cities, underground, black market places, pretty sleazy places. I never went into any of those. I just ended up with a ship. And I thought, wouldn't that be cool to sail that outside the 12-mile limit with a whole bunch of gambling equipment on board and go, fuck you, government. And so we did. It just came together. I had a 157 foot ship that slept 120 passengers and, I don't know, about 30 crew or something. And we sailed outside the 12-mile limit. We gambled all night. We came back in the morning. It worked okay until we had a bit of union strife. That turns out that was organised back in the day when it was much easier to organise shit. We didn't have the modern electronic means of communications today. But the bottom line was the government sent me broke. They didn't go through the normal legal methods, but it doesn't matter what method they used, they sent me broke. And I went to Australia. And in Australia I learned to smoke weed. And now here I am back in New Zealand, having been responsible for 2 law changes: Saturday shopping and casinos. And I want to be part of the changing of the law for cannabis. I thought when I joined this fight, after I got out of jail, I came back to New Zealand and I got involved in a grow room. I thought my way of getting involved in this fight is to grow some DAC, sell it, use those funds to finance the fight, to change the law. Well, I got snapped. Spent 3 years in jail. 2 years, 8 months of a 3-year sentence. They wouldn't give me parole because I got caught smoking a doobie in jail. And I got delayed from my release on parole of 18 months. So never let anybody convince you that smoking a doobie is not a serious matter. It's extremely serious if you're the wrong person in the wrong place at the wrong time. So I decided at that time that in that 3-year lag that I couldn't believe that people in New Zealand allowed this to continue. And that what I would do when I got out is that I would travel around the country and I would just talk with people and tell them what it was that you, if not you specifically, then in your name, people like me are being locked in jail for dealing or smoking or enjoying a flower. And I just decided that was such an obscenity that that's what I would do. And took a couple of years after getting released, but I hooked up with Normal, found they had a bus that needed a driver, got myself a heavy traffic licence, and we went on the road. And since then, I have to say that I've probably smoked more cannabis with more people, more publicly, in more towns than anybody else in the history of New Zealand. I don't think there's a town or a city, certainly there's not a city, but I don't think there's a town that I haven't stopped the bus in and we've got out and we've had either a 420 or a puff. Usually parked outside police stations or courthouses or other equally prominent place. Just as an aside, and I don't want to make a big thing of this, but that first tour when we ended up in Invercargill, at 4:20 when everybody's sparking it up. There were about 60 plus people in Chicago outside the cenotaph, and we'd just driven around the town inviting people to this protest. And I had a microphone as I drove, and I would tell people that we were going to have a big public smoke up, that this was civil disobedience, that please come along and join us, and as we smoke, please bring your buds, and if you don't have buds, bring your money. So we couldn't be more out there. And so we ended up outside the cenotaph. Everybody's parking up, it's 4:20. I've already had my little chat. And then I said something to the order of, I understand there's a bit of a shortage of weed in town. And with that, somebody made a comment, and I looked around, all the police cars are pulling up. I thought, that's interesting. So we ended up with about 10 or more cops and half a dozen cars there. And we had a plant this size in the window of the bus. And so these two cops came up to me and started blah, blah, blahing. And you can find this online, this particular movie. But there was a bit of blah, blah, blahing. And one of our team members, he's blowing smoke in the cop's face, and it's, you know, we're going to search you, and I'm saying, why? You know, we haven't done anything wrong. I can see the plant. That's no reason to search me, blah, blah, blah. So you'll find that online. The sad part is, and this is what I just wanted to mention without making a big thing of it, but the second constable, that was the quieter one of the two, who had a permanent smile on his face. We thought he was enjoying his work, but apparently he was just a smiler. He's the one that just killed his wife, allegedly, in Chicago. So that's a very sad thing. But hey, we met the guy, and he wanted to do bad things to us because of our cannabis, and just look, doesn't matter where you come from or who you are, shit can fall on you from a great height. That man's life was over completely, and it's sad. So let's move on from that point. So after that, after this tour, I was convinced that we were very, very close. The feedback we were getting, the fact that we could drive the complete country smoking everywhere, and only once did we actually have arrests in Palmerston North. Easter Sunday, cops had nothing better to do, so they decided to come down and arrest a couple of people as a symbol that we couldn't do what we wanted in their town. So we got around the whole country without any effort, and so that to me meant we're ready for change. So I declared the slogan, legal by 2010. What year are we in now? For those of you watching this in 10 years' time and it's still not legal, right now is 2017. So 7 years past the deadline or the target that I set. But it's not going to go past this next government, because that's what's going to occur. We're, for the first time in a large number of election cycles, we now have differences between our New Zealand political parties. We have Winston Peters sitting on the fence, we'll do a referendum. Now we know how public votes work. They're influenced by bullshit and propaganda. Some people can even vote for somebody like Trump, but let's not go to America. And and see, now I just, okay, look, you guys are students, right? And at the end of a lecture, you're told, well, there's going to be an exam. Now, I want you to know that there will be questions asked, usually about what was I talking about, because sometimes if you ask that question when you've had a smoke, those of you that know what I'm talking about will follow me here. If there's a break in the conversation, it is lethal for somebody to say, what were we talking about? The moment you say that, no one's got any fucking idea what we were talking about. And you're all nodding. I can tell the smoke is amongst us. You're all nodding knowingly. And then it's 10 or 15 minutes before we work out what it was we were talking about. True? So, what was I talking about? Come on, I'm
the
stoned
bus tour
one,
in
not
Palmerston
you.
North and
Palmerston North. Palmerston North, we got arrested. So now we're thinking things are really good. You know, we've got the right reaction from the police. So we got back to Auckland with a bus that was worn out, needed some work, and I decided that it would make sense if we had some support people who would pay a monthly membership of a club, and then we could park the bus there and just have a private little club. This would be cool. It's actually their plan that I'd spent nearly 3 years in jail working with other inmates, working through in our head all the mindless detail that's necessary in order to talk about, you know, how are we going to set up this club? What sort of rules, if any, we're going to have. And we particularly in jail enjoyed talking about this over a joint. It's the obvious place to do it. So yeah, there was a lot of joints smoked in Rangipo prison, but we ended up with a pretty good plan, and a few years later I was able to implement that by opening the Dakta Green in Auckland. And I thought it would last a few months. A few weeks I would have been happy with, but a few months, that was what we were looking for. Well, it was about 4.5 years, I think, before they finally got nasty, and they eventually closed us down. Now, for the last 18 years, I have either been on bail, in jail, or on parole for 18 years. I'm on parole now. If somebody comes and arrests me before August, the cycle will continue. If I can get to August of this year, my parole will end of my current parole will end. And for the first time in 19 years come August, the first time in 19 years, I will no longer be under state control. If you take cannabis out of my record, there's nothing left. I'm proud to tell you that I got a 100-mile-per-hour speeding ticket, that's on there, and failing to keep left when I was 21 years old, $30 fine. That's my criminal record, except for all my cannabis. 18 years, 19 years almost, that they've had me under state control for cannabis. So I want you all to understand that there is a very good reason for people to be campaigning to change this iniquitous and nasty and horrible law. So, for the last few years that I've been in jail, I haven't had much to do in the form of campaigning to change. And when I got out of jail just over a year ago, it was clear the campaign was over. There is no campaign now to change the law because it's inevitable. There is no turning back. I don't care what our members of parliament say. There is no turning back. For the first time, we actually have a political party that's come out openly and said we have a policy of legalising for recreational and medicinal, the Green Party. I'm not here to advocate that you vote for any party, but if you want to see cannabis law change, vote for a candidate and a party that you think is likely to achieve what you want it to achieve. So I don't care who you vote for, but you have to vote, because that's how changes will take place. In the meantime, I don't really give a monkeys about the law. You get to the point where, really? You're going to arrest me again? You know, I'd spark up here if it wouldn't be offensive to some smoking on campus. I mean, I spent 2 years, 8 months of a 3-year sentence in jail, and I came out radicalised. I was ready to do mayhem. Now, I'm a pretty reasonable person. I've lived a privileged life. I mean, I haven't had wealth and all of that stuff. Well, when I did, it didn't last. But my privileged life is that I've been white, middle class. And when I go to jail, then most of the people that are in jail for cannabis are not white. And so Maori and Pacific Islanders are unfairly targeted. You know all of these things. I can tell you some horrible stories about life in jail for anything, doesn't matter what you're there for. But for people to be there for a flower, people to be there because they smoked a bud, or got caught with a little grow, or they're medicinal users. I've met all of those people in jail. I met a guy one day who was serving 3 years and he had lost his house because he had a personal grow. He had a commercial grow in another house and he lost that. He had bought it for the purpose of growing. But he had a small grow in his own private home which he'd inherited from his grandparents. It was unencumbered. It was an inheritance, and because they got him on the other crop, and he had a tent with half a dozen plants in it in his house, they took that house too. So there is nothing that I can think of that will put a pretty picture to prohibition. You all know that we have more people in prison than virtually every other country in the world, except America. They tend to lock up more people than anybody else, but then they're crazy motherfuckers, and we know that. And the question is, why? Why do we lock people up in jail? I have been searching for that answer for a long time. After I got out the first time, that tour when I told you we went to Wellington and on into the South Island on that tour, we took the time to drive out to the hut and went to see Peter Dunn. He wasn't there, but his staff were there, and I said, I want to talk about cannabis. We'll have somebody call you. 10 minutes later, I got a phone call from parliamentary staffer of the United Future Party, and I said, I just want to ask a question. I've just been released from jail for cannabis, and I want to know why are people locked up in jail for cannabis? And I didn't think I needed to tell this guy the obvious. Please don't tell me it's against the law. I know that. That's why the fuck I was in jail, you idiot. And very simply just, yes, oh, well, it's simple why you're in jail. You broke the law. Oh, okay. Why do we have that law? Well, because it's bad for you. I said, really? Yep. Yeah, it's bad for you. So, that 8 years ago was the reason why Peter Dunn was all in favour of continuing to lock people up. Now, Peter Dunn recently said that he will step back from being the one to grant medical use. It's a big thing, medical use of cannabis. The police won't lock people up for medical use of cannabis. It's all okay now. And I'm stepping back, so I'll leave it to my officials. All right? Now let me just point out a few facts. The officials make a recommendation to the minister. That's the way it was in the past. And the minister would act on their recommendation because he's not a doctor. What the hell would he know? Nobody has ever had approval to use cannabis until, you remember the chap, the young guy whose mother made a lot of noise, Rose Renton, and her son died. It was too late. I don't know whether cannabis would have solved his problem, okay? But that was the first time that cannabis had ever been approved in this country since the 1975 law came into effect. So nobody else had ever been granted permission. So now, in an election year, we've got an Associate Minister of Health who throughout his political career has been totally opposed to cannabis, now saying mealy-mouthed things like...
Not in his private life, however.
But I don't care about his private life, because he's going to go back to his private life in a few months' time when he loses the Ohario electorate, and I don't care what he's got to say then, because it will have no effect.
He's an admitted cannabis consumer.
Yes, a long, long time ago. he has admitted that he's used it. But, why do people in positions of authority think it's okay to come after people for cannabis? In the same way, before the homosexual law reform of the 1980s, before that time, the media found it okay to denigrate homosexual people. Men, women, didn't matter. They would denigrate them, particularly the men. For some reason, male editors didn't worry about talking about gay women. That was somehow okay. Then we had the homosexual law reforms of the 1980s, and we came into the modern world and we realised that every human being has a meaning and purpose in our life. And the media stopped denigrating. It took a little while, but they stopped denigrating and running down gay, homosexual, all of the alphabet people. That's the wrong term, you know what I'm talking about. And so now, society says we're a rainbow and we're all happy and friendly together. And I agree with all of that, don't get me wrong. So what do we have, however, with cannabis? It's illegal, so the media find it okay to call it dope heads and other derogatory terms. And the moment it's legal, that'll change. And you've already noticed that change over the last couple of years as it's become legal around the world, particularly TV3, but other media in this country have taken a less strident approach. And I think that's important. However, what's the future of cannabis? Since I got out a year ago, I had to deal with the post-traumatic stress disorder symptoms that I suffered, so that took a fair amount of cannabis consumption. But because we're being filmed and I'm on probation, I only ever smoked on the computer, so it wasn't actually real. Okay, does that cover me, do you think? Any law students present? No, I think I'm fucked anyway. So send me to jail, motherfuckers. I don't care. I've got friends there. So, what I'm concerned about is not whether it will be legal or not. I think we're past that. I said that earlier. No question in anybody's mind here, it's only a question of time. But what we don't have the debate, haven't had the debate about in this country, is when it is legal, when debate is going on to make it legal, what is it that we want legal? What form will legalising take? Will it be the private profit model, like they're running in Colorado? Or will it be the government-controlled model, like in Uruguay, which incidentally you might have seen a couple of days ago? They've announced sales have just commenced of cannabis through the pharmacies in Uruguay at $1.50 a gram. I'd like to be able to tell you right now that I have a pound of weed with me, but that was last trip. I'd like to tell you that it's for sale at $1.50 a gram, but last trip it was free. And I can't tell you any of those things because that's just not the way it works. But Uruguay thought it was pretty cool to change their laws to take cannabis dealing away from the criminal people. And so they have commercial growers selling through chemist shops at $1.50 a gram, and the profit has been taken out of cannabis so that there's no longer any necessity for people to get all upset and fire guns at each other and get all nasty. So that's the debate we should be having right now. And in my conversations with the drug researcher, Dr. Chris Wilkins, he has studied the recent polls, and he says that there's about 80% in favour of changing of the laws to some extent, but what is clear to him is that the public of New Zealand don't want to see a for-profit type of future. They want to see a not-for-profit. They want to see, it shouldn't be a crime for me to give you a bud. It shouldn't be a crime for you to give me a bud, more likely. So that is more likely to get support from government, whoever they might be, because they will have the support of the university, researchers, the public are already on board. I had a big debate last night with some friends and we were talking about what sort of format. And the reality is that if the people that are in the cannabis culture can't agree on a model that we're looking for, then how is the government going to work it out? How is the government of the day going to be able to decide, well, what changes do we need to make? So we need to be having that debate. It is my view that the cannabis industry belongs to us. Not me, it's not mine. I ran the Dakta Green. I didn't own it. It's in my name and I took the fall for it, but that's because it's hard getting a board of directors of responsible people to sit around a board table and plan a reasonable legal future of cannabis when of course every one of them would be subject to arrest. So we had a whole bunch of people that were involved in the running of the club, but ultimately it was my legal responsibility. But in the future, it should consist of not-for-profit clubs. Not-for-profit clubs that are run at local level, that, you know, I guess the best example is the RSA. The RSA clubs, the Return Service Association, is that correct? Yeah, it is association. The Return Service Association, after the Second World War, and to a lesser degree after the Vietnam War, Korea War, but after that war, the RSA had a lot of members that needed help. And so the club existed for the benefit of its members. They provided in their club rooms cheaper meals, cheaper alcohol, and if they made a profit, what happened to the profits? Didn't go into anybody's pocket. Oh, they paid the staff, you've got to pay the staff, but profits generated went back to the members, went back to the club. Now I like that RSA model. And some years ago I used that in a public statement and the RSA got up in arms and wanted to lynch me and shoot me because how dare I suggest that the RSA should be used for a sleazy, dirty, filthy, criminal activity like I was talking about at that time. So the RSA is the model that I like because there's no profits going into private pockets. But it's not enough to just have the clubs that can provide that, and I don't mind paying a price for my weed that covers the cost of overheads for the premises. That all makes sense. I know we've got to cover those costs. But I don't want to pay a premium price because the market's controlled by the brewery's new subsidiary or Rothmans who think, let's get out of tobacco, well, let's keep killing people with tobacco, but let's get into cannabis. I don't want to see any big business. Even with the greatest respect, Mr. Lord, the Waikato dairy farmer who's now got his multi-million-dollar business in Colorado that some of you will know about. I've been told he's a lovely man, but I don't want to see anybody coming here with a huge economic clout that will end up dictating the way the cannabis industry will work in this country. I think that the people who have been to jail, who have had run-ins with the law, who have had to go searching for a tinny because the mate's run out of bloody weed and you've got to go find that tinny house. Please have a $20 half gram tinny because I really want to... You know what I'm talking about. We've all done it. We've all been there. So it's time to have a nice place that belongs to us. And we can grow some plants in those premises, or maybe we'll pay some growers to produce a variety of different strains. And we'll have bud tenders that are trained and qualified. Because the last thing I want, if I have a particular medical need or even a recreational need, if I have that need and cannabis is my solution, I want to talk to somebody knowledgeable that can tell me, oh, this will fuck you up, but that one will make you nice and light and breezy, and that one you'll make love all night. Sorry to point to you when I say that, but you know where I'm at. Whatever you want the cannabis for, one thing for real, you want it not because it's going to do you harm or because you hate it. I haven't met anybody that smoked cannabis that says, shit, this is horrible! It's nice. We do it because we like it. Yeah? So, if the definition of medicine is something you take to make you feel better, try and convince me that cannabis is not a medicine for everybody. Yeah? I take it for medicine. I actually need it as a medicine today, but I didn't when I began, but I took it as a medicine then because it made me relax. It's made me realise that when I was a child at school, I probably suffered from ADDDTTs. You know what I'm referring to? I can never pronounce it. Not quite sure what it was, but the ADDTs, something like that, was I just found relax and a pleasant time. Until we get all paranoid. And how many people have been paranoid on weed? Yep, most of us. And how many do you think, how often do you think that is related to the cannabis itself? And how much is related to its illegal nature? Because most people that I talk to that get paranoid are frightened of getting caught. Oh yeah, the medicine might have an impact on that too, but I can tell you that whilst I felt like that in my early days, I haven't felt that for a long time. You know, once you've been to jail, there's nothing to fear. So I haven't had any nervousness or concerns about cannabis and my interaction with the law for many years. If I did, then of course I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing. So, clubs that can be for profit as long as the profit goes back to the members. And the members decide. I'm cool with that, right? Now what about a research facility? Don't we all want to know that our method of consumption is the safest, the cleanest, that the buds we're smoking have been grown in a healthy environment, that your mate's dog hasn't been pissing in the grow room or the cat hasn't been shitting in the garden beds? I mean, that's the mildest things that happen, all right? I want, if I'm going to be smoking my favourite herb at my club, I want my club to provide me with the best quality product at the best price. And the price is not set by availability, because we want to grow heaps. The price is set by cost recovery. There are basic costs. Can we do $1.50 a gram in this country? Probably not. Our overheads are a little higher than Uruguay. But should the government stick their hand out for a big tax cut? Well, let me tell you what happens in Colorado. when they have expensive cannabis. Colorado has restrictions. They don't have anywhere to smoke it for a start. You can go into these places and you can buy your cannabis, but there's nowhere to consume it. You can't consume it in the dispensaries where you've just purchased it, and there are no clubs. So the only place to consume it is at home. There are some hotels and accommodation places for the tourists that are now beginning to open. Bed and Breakfast is the name of one chain that's just started. Sounds perfect to me. I'm thinking of registering that name now. Seriously, the price they charge in Colorado is set, I think, artificially high by the taxes that they impose and by the seed to sale control of that particular plant. When the plant's of a little, seed or cutting, they label it, and it's followed right the way through to the sale of it. That's a very expensive process. Nobody's asked the question over there, why the hell do we want to do that? Like, please tell me what the hell it is about cannabis that everybody is so fearful about. Because it's not the product. It doesn't kill people. So why is it that we think that we need to, and I don't have a problem with keeping it out of the hands of kids, unless the child has a prescription from a doctor, and we know of cases where children can benefit. That's not what this is about. This is about adult use and being able to make adult decisions. So a club gives us that opportunity at the cheapest possible price, and the government should be satisfied that they're going to save hundreds of millions of dollars by saving on prosecution costs, though. Are just horrific. Thanks to you people, or perhaps your parents, taxpayers, 2 legs ago I was locked up the day that tobacco smoking was stopped in prison. And 11.5 months later I was released and I was no longer addicted to tobacco. Not proud of it. Started at 10 years old, probably addicted through my father's second-hand smoke in the car in the house. But all my life, 51 years I smoked, and I stopped the day I was sent to jail. No smoking. And it's so much nicer. And now I advocate that our daiquiris in the future shouldn't allow tobacco smoking. And they certainly shouldn't allow beer, or alcohol, I'm sorry. Because they're a separate product. We don't want pubs selling weed. We, in fact, at the daiquiri had a rule that if you've been drinking, you're not welcome in. And we had a alcohol breathalyzer at the counter. If you looked at all under the influence or smelled of alcohol, you'd be required to blow. And if you were over the legal limit for driving, you'd be asked to come back another day. And the reason is quite simple. We have a number of people in our club, and this won't be across the whole population, but a number of people in our club that were alcoholics. And a close friend of mine in the club, every year he'll ring me on his anniversary day and he'll tell me, I think the last one was 28 years sober. 28 years sober, but he still refers to him as an alcoholic. And he does not want drunk people sitting alongside him while he's sitting in our cannabis club having a joint or a bowl or a pipe or spots or all the other myriad ways that we like to partake. It is our view that if you want to have a drink, go to the pub. There's plenty of licensed premises out there. But don't come to the cannabis club when you're pissed. Because the only time we ever had trouble, 2 or 3 times, was only with somebody that had been drinking and wanted to get in and demanded their right to come in and buy cannabis, this illegal product. That's my right to come in here! Yeah, right. Amazing, isn't it? I went to jail, so you can declare that to be a right to come into our place and buy cannabis. So, if we end up with these clubs, and they're in every town or community where the locals want one, what's the next step from there? How about a research facility? How about a pharmaceutical company? Some of you will be familiar with GW Pharmaceuticals, who produce Sativex. Sativex, that people say is $350 for a bottle, $1,200 for a month's supply. Well, I think it's sick that a pharmaceutical company from the United Kingdom can come to New Zealand and can sell a bottle of Sativex at black market prices. Black market prices that we, the people in the cannabis culture, set, because we buy from whoever's got it and we'll pay whatever price is going because we want it. So I think that black market prices... So if GW Pharmaceuticals decided that they wanted to come to New Zealand and establish a base here, if they were to say to our government, we're going to set up a research facility here, it doesn't matter how many research facilities they've got around the world, they might choose to set one up here. And for that we need, we're going to grow 10,000 plants in this secure facility. I mean, they do that in England now, okay? And we're going to need some patience so that we can test whatever it is that we're going to be testing. Well, our government would move heaven and earth to get a new business started with somebody like GW Pharmaceuticals. But the question is, why don't we start our own pharmaceutical company? You know, the people that started GW Pharmaceuticals, oh yeah, a couple of them were scientists and some business people. And maybe in their student years they actually had a toke. Or maybe they didn't. Maybe they just saw this opportunity. But they applied some scientific principles, established a company with the right credentials, the right board of directors, and they got the support of the UK government to grow large quantities of cannabis. We all knew what the result was going to be. An extract from cannabis is going to be good for people. We know that. And of course that's what GW Pharmaceuticals found out. So now they are a worldwide company. They're a leader in pharmaceutical grade cannabis. And I asked the question, why do they have to be the ones? Why do we have to have something like Sativex that involves a spray? What about all the other delivery methods of cannabis? Don't they need to be researched too? Don't we need to have alternative like lozenges and salves and ointments and all of these other different products? And it should be made with New Zealand grown cannabis. There should be New Zealand scientists or scientists that we're employing for our New Zealand company. And who should own that company? Like GW Pharmaceuticals. I don't want them making money off sick people. What about our clubs that we all belong to? You know those clubs that I talked about, those not-for-profit? I put $100 in through a club in order to invest in a pharmaceutical company that was owned by all of us. And maybe you would too. Because if we don't, then it's going to be GW Pharmaceuticals or Rothmans or a brewing company, but it won't be us, and we'll be once again the pawns. Because your power is your willingness to put $5 a week into your club. I'm making this number up, all right? There's no club right now. A million people in a club paying $5 a week, $5 million a week is a very nice income stream. Thank you for coming. So, I think that we also need an association with at least one university, maybe more, because when I talked earlier about an educated bud tender, I actually want that. And right now, if you want to be a bartender in a alcohol establishment or a bar manager, you have these papers to complete, you have this course to do, you have this studies, you have this experience to, then you can get a job.
We need that to serve bloody coffee today.
There you go. So why should we expect less from our bud tenders than we do from our baristas? You make a good point. Of course we shouldn't. But who's going to train those people? At the moment, this is a black market in this country. Nobody's going to come out and say, oh yes, well I'm your trainer. But when it's legal, who's going to come out then and say we'll train? Well, you know, there's issues, there's problems. So what do we need in order to become a club manager of a not-for-profit cannabis club? There will be a range of papers that are already available through commerce, through law, wherever, in all the universities. We attach to that, those papers, some specific, industry-specific information and training and learnings, and then all of a sudden we've got what we're looking for. We've got trained people that are going to be able to provide at the best possible price a quality product that's been properly grown safely, and it's an industry that's owned by all of us in the same way that we all own the RSA, even if you're not a member. One day you might walk in and have a beer. Well, you've contributed to their profits for their members. Yes, we'll have members of this cannabis club or clubs, but they should also be open to the public. If you're of the right age, I think there should be an age restriction, because not everybody will want to be a member, and that's okay. But benefits will accrue to the membership. So there we're at. Clubs, research facility, and the potential for making good profits from a pharmaceutical company. But I don't want to see GW Pharmaceuticals coming in here making good profits off anybody in this country. I want to see us all making those profits without all having to be shareholders, because not everybody can afford to be a shareholder if we do this private profit model, unless we step up and act like it's legal. Our motto in the Dakta right the way through is live like it's legal. And we actually did that. Okay, some of us got arrested too, but most people didn't. We lived like it's legal. And no paranoia, peaceful, wonderful experience. And if we could duplicate that around the country, we're getting somewhere. Now, where do we start? Where do we take that first step? And here we are. We're here. This is my first step. My first step is to come and tell you guys, I'm 67 years old. I'm not going to live to 150. This industry that I'm talking about, this new cannabis industry that is going to sweep around the world, particularly in New Zealand, it's your industry. You're the people that will have the jobs there. You're the ones that will train to be the managers, the scientists. It's my goal would be to see a club that charged a price that allowed us to make a small profit that would permit us to give away cannabis to those that are ill. Helen Kelly should have been receiving cannabis from our club, not from the black market. That's obscene. Obscene that people have to do that. And people like her, high profile, they don't get arrested. But in the last month, I know of 3 people that are medical users that have been arrested. It happens all the time. There is no bullshit from police that we won't arrest medical users. Look, the police are not our friend. I have had some terrible run-ins with police. The Dakta folded because the police acted unlawfully in order to come after us. Okay, well, there's probably other things that I should have been telling you about, but the challenge to you guys that I'll leave you with, before you ask any questions, the challenge I leave with you is you are the future of this country. You are the future leaders, you are the future workers, you are the future slaves, you are the future cannabis consumers, and you're going to be part of the industry. Now, if that's the case, then you have to do what you have to do to make that happen. And if some of you are interested in getting involved in the establishment of a research facility, I'll work with you. If you want to establish a club, a not-for-profit local club, I'll work with you. If you want to set up a research and development company, pharmaceutical company, whatever it is, I can't run this thing myself. It takes people like you that have a future. I just want to go home and smoke weed, you guys. I've done 18 years, nearly 19 years. I think I've done my bit, okay? And all I can do now is to encourage you and anybody else that might be watching this to actually get involved in the next stage of the development of what should be our industry.